Cool. So the first step in setting up our slackline is going to be building the anchor point knot at the end, at one end towards the tree. We start with the, loose end and the rope end. I'm going to take the rope end, or the end that you're going to be walking on, and make a loop. Then I'm going to create a slip knot by putting a bite through that loop. We want to make sure that our line stays flat, so just twist your webbing around until you get something nice like this. Then we're going to take the end with, no slack line on it. We're going to feed another bite through this bite we already have. So we have something like this. Finally, we want to pull this part of the bite here back in through this loop. So I'm just going to pull on the end that's going to be our slack line until it feeds through just enough to have something like this shape. So here, you want to be careful not to let the end with the bite fall through, and we're just going to pull the tail out, the tail end being this part here. We then have just one little, loop end here left over. And you want to make sure you have a nice pinch on this so it'll lie flat. And by that I mean when it's coming out of the knot, you want to have it completely folded in half. So I'm just going to fiddle around with this until I get it folded in half properly. So here now I have it folded half well. I can yank that tight and it will still lie flat. When we're done and we want to take our slack line down, we can just pull this tail off and it'll undo our knot very easily. So now we're going to set up a second anchor point the exact same way we set up the first. We take the end that is going to be connected to our slack line and create a loop. Take a bite of rope from the side away from the tree and feed that through to create a slip knot. Just like this. We're then going to feed another bite from the opposite end, the end without the slack line on it, through our first bite. And then we pull on the end that's going to be our slack line until it pops through. At this point we want to pull the tail end out. So here's the loop, and here's the tail that we're pulling out. Just like that. We'll feed through a nice amount and pull it nice and tight. In the end your knot should look something like this. So next we're going to tie a clove hitch onto our biner, and that way we can create a clove hitch here to tie on one biner and one on the other end of our slack line. And we're going to tighten between the two. So here we're going to grab it nice close to the tree. You want to start by creating a loop just like this so that it goes perpendicular to where a slack line is going to be, so basically across. You'll note here that the first loop I'm going on top of my loop, and now I'm going to make a second loop. The second loop is going to look very similar, except go underneath our cross section here. So note here, this piece of webbing is on top, and this piece goes underneath. Then we're going to stack them on top of each other, and we're going to do the piece going underneath on top of the piece on top. If that was unclear, just try it out for yourself and you'll see there's really only one way it'll work. So given a couple tries, you'll definitely get it. Just going to pull this nice and tight so we have a clove hitch knot that's going to keep our biner sitting nice and flat. Just going to dress it so it's all nice there. You should have something like that. Yeah. Cool. So after we set up our second biner with the clove hitch, we're going to grab the two and start feeding back and forth. Now one thing we notice here is that the gates are actually opening on opposite sides. This one's opening towards the camera, and my other gate is actually opening away from the camera. So what I'm going to do is flip that around, just like so that they're both on the same side. So now we're going to run them back and forth. The idea here is to create a loop within a loop. So just bear with me for a second. We're going to start by creating a loop by going from this biner to the anchor point biner and back to this one. Now I'm going to start on the loop within a loop. In order to get this to loop inside, I have to go from underneath the biner and go back up, so that we're creating this loop here inside of this bigger loop. Running it back to the anchor point, we see the same thing. We want to actually create this loop inside of here. This loop inside of the loop. So what we're going to do is take this bite, bring it into the biner, and feed it under the loop we already had, so that we've created a loop within a loop. So like this section. And when we have it all set up like this, we can essentially just, should I feed it once more time? Yep. So again, we're going to set another loop within a loop here, so that we have a system that's going to lock on itself. So when I pull this tight, it's actually pulling this outside part, the outside loop, much more tight as well, and that's going to bring tension on our inside loop and hold it in place. As we tighten this, it's not going to slide at all. We then have a 2-to-1 pulley system, and should be able to crank this pretty tight without too much trouble. Cool. Cool. So now we're going to set up our secondary pulley system to make our life a little bit easier. We're simply going to create I don't know what it's called, but we're going to feed a bite through our biner and then have it go pretty much right over top of the biner and just slide it down like that and make sure everything lies nice and flat, just like that. And so we're going to set this up here and bring it back to our tree or our anchor point, where we're going to throw on a second biner and start running it between the two. So again, we're going to create a system here where we can just pull like this. And so you can see how much easier it is to pull now. So when our beaters get nice and close like this, we might want to even tighten it some more. So what we can do is simply let the line out and reset our beater a little farther back, just by feeding some through. Great, so now you're all set up and ready to slackline.
Bye.